Yo, what's up guys? Kerna here. I'm going to try something a little bit different with my channel. It's not going to be the typical uploading of a montage here, which, is what I would normally do. I'm going to try doing a commentary on specific topic of the solo laning phase. It's an aspect which I consider to be one of my stronger points towards my play in League of Legends. And I do feel like over my vast amount of games, I've accumulated a few tips and pieces of knowledge that can help. Alright, and the first tip that I want to go for is the first jungle gank. The enemy jungler I'm talking specifically, and where he's going to gank and how to avoid it. In the first clip here you're going to see that I am Kennen in the top lane, and I can see that Riven isn't in lane straight away, so I'm already thinking that she's most likely pulling the blue buff for her jungler. And when she comes into the lane here, I'm going to freeze frame it, you can see that she's missing a small portion of her health. This confirms what I already thought, that she did in fact pull the blue buff from her jungler. And what this means for me in the lane is that I know that I'm not going to be one of the first lanes ganked, because he's going to finish his red buff and then he's going to be looking to gank mid or bot the majority of the time. And guys, this is just the highest probability that he's going to do that. It's not an exact science, but if you play with the numbers, the majority of the time it's going to work out for you. Anyways, what this means for me in this specific lane is I can completely bully this Riven around. Because she pulled the red buff, the blue buff, sorry, this meant I got the XP advantage on her, so when she got into lane, I just rushed to level 2 and completely zoned her off the creeps. This is why the jungler should never pull the buff on the same side as the top lane. It's because top lane's such a snowbally lane, and especially when both laners have Ignite, like this lane right here, is you really don't want to be affecting that negatively in the early levels. As you can see, I've completely chunked this Riven out in the early game. And she's staying in lane, desperately trying to leech XP. That's her just hit level 2 there because of how effectively I zoned her. And she just, if she greets like this, if anybody greets like this against you staying in lane, even if you're worried about the gank, like the worst thing that can possibly happen right now is I get ganked and I just stay in this huge minion wave here and they tank all the creeps and I possibly just get the 1v2. But this is something that you want to be punishing in the laning phase. In the early levels, people don't generally want to back. They always want to stay until they get enough gold to get that first item. They want to get that Doran's ring. They want to get that Doran's blade. They always want to get that something, the Amp Tome. They don't want to go back to base, heal up, and come back with just an extra couple of pots. So if you find yourself in a situation like this when they're greeting just to get those last bit of gold for those items, just make sure you punish it, take your opportunities, and just capitalize on the little things like this in the early laning phase, and that's honestly just enough in itself to win the lane. Okay, and the next thing I want to talk about is the defensive warding if the top laner didn't pull the buff. And if the top laner didn't pull the buff, then that means that the gank that's roughly going to come in for you, the earliest gank that's going to come, is around 2 minutes 50. And if you ward on this X right here at 2 minutes 50 every single time that your laner does not pull the first buff, you'll protect yourself against this specific gank. And using the same method of gaining information for where the jungler started, this is where you would want to ward for the mid lane. The next thing I want to say is simple but effective, is when your laner's completely out of mana, make sure you punish that and be extra aggressive. In this one, notice the low health creeps on my side, and by positioning myself the way I do, I make Orianna make a decision. She comes forward to last hit the creeps, but in trade she takes free harass to the face. This is something that you want to be punishing in general throughout the entirety of your laning phase. It's probably the most effective way to predict where your enemy laner is going to be moving, and thus makes it the easiest way for you to land skill shots. Also, a quick niche thing that you can do is last hit the minion in front of you, and as it dies, throw a charm or any CC spell that you have straight behind it, and it's a good way to catch your enemy laner off guard. The next thing, which is mid lane specific I suppose, but once you get your blue buff, you don't get that blue buff because you are entitled to it being the mid laner. The jungler has chosen to give you his blue buff because you are the stronger person. That is the only reason that you get the blue buff. You get the blue buff because you've been in lane collecting XP and collecting more gold than the jungler. So therefore you can make more use out of the blue buff to help your team and your lane to snowball the game. So when you get blue buff, you don't get it because you're entitled to it. You get it because your team needs you to have it. And on the opposite side of the coin is when your opponent laner roams, like in this specific scenario, I can see that Orianna's roamed bot, she's taken a kill. So what I did is I shoved the wave, and what I do is I cut off one of her return paths. I go where I think she is going to return back to lane, and I wait in a bush waiting for her. And you'll be surprised how often this works. In this specific scenario, Vi comes along with her. So I just pick the lower target, then ult towards bot lane where my team are. So Orianna did roam, but I got something for it, and this is something you want to do in general. Always try and cut off the paths when they're coming back from a roam, because people are so greedy. Players get so greedy, they don't want to just back. They'll always go through the jungle. They'll always try and get some way back into lane to get that CS which you've pushed under turret. Well, anyways guys, that's it for this tips video. I'm not sure if I'll be doing any more of these. Leave a like or a comment if you actually enjoyed this or found it useful in any way. But if not, then I'll just go back to doing my previous montage stuff. So, just leave a comment, like, dislike, let me know what you think. Anyways guys, in a bit, check out my previous videos.